Ethan, your father and I need to talk to you about the marriage arrangement we made for you years ago. You're almost fully recovered, and we were wondering, would you be willing to come back to New York and go through with it? His mother's voice was hesitant over the phone. If you're still against it, I can talk to your father again. We could try to dissolve the contract. In the dim room, the only sound was silence. Just as his mother was about to assume this attempt had failed like all the others, he spoke. I'll do it. I'll come back and get married. A stunned pause on the other end of the line. You will. Ethan's voice was placid. Yes. I just need a little time to wrap things up here in Santa Monica. I'll be back within 2 weeks. Mom, you and Dad can start preparing for the wedding. After a few more brief pleasantries, he hung up. The moment the call ended, the thunderous beat of music from downstairs surged into the room. Faintly, he could make out the strains of someone singing Happy Birthday. It was the party Ava and Chloe were throwing for Leo. A soft knock came at the door. Leo, holding a slice of black forest cake, peeked his head in with a smile. His handsome, boyish face, smudged with a few streaks of frosting, looked almost innocent. He fluttered his eyelashes. Ethan, come down and hang out with us. Ethan, who had long since seen through the facade, kept his voice cold. I have work to do. You guys have fun. Almost instantly, Leo's eyes reddened. Is it because you don't like me, Ethan? Is that why you keep pushing me away? An involuntary frown creased Ethan's brow. He hadn't done a single thing, yet here was Leo, acting as if he'd just been mercilessly bullied. A cold sneer formed in his mind. He had no patience for this manipulative charade. Say the performance for Ava and Chloe. It doesn't work on me. As he moved to shut the door, Leo cried out, Ethan, don't. Leo thrust his hand out, blocking the door just as it was closing. It slammed shut on his fingers. A sickening crunch echoed in the hallway, and the back of his pale hand instantly blossomed with a dark, ugly bruise. Hiss! Ava and Chloe, who had just come upstairs, saw the whole thing. The two women rushed forward in near unison, cradling Leo's injured hand with heart-wrenching concern. Seeing the bruise, Chloe's eyes, usually sharp and fiery, turned red at the corners. Her temper flared, and she rounded on Ethan. It's one thing if you don't like him, but how could you do something so despicable? Ethan, when did you become this person? Ava, normally cool and composed, stared at Ethan with a gaze filled with profound disappointment. Ethan, it's Leo's birthday. You've gone too far. Her tone softened instantly as she turned back to Leo. Leo, does it still hurt? Let's get you some ice. As Ava led Leo away, Chloe followed, frantically trying to soothe him. Leo, don't be sad. That new sports car I just got, it's yours. After the party, I'll take you for a spin. A drive always makes you feel better. Coddled between the two women, Leo's expression finally brightened. Thank you, Ava. He then turned to Chloe, his eyes still shimmering with unshed tears. Chloe, please don't race anymore. It's so dangerous. I'd worry about you. Seeing him finally smile, Chloe didn't hesitate. Okay, anything for you. As long as you're happy, whatever you say goes. Watching them descend the stairs, Ethan stood in the doorway, feeling a sense of dizzying unreality, like he was trapped in a bad dream. He could remember a time, not so long ago, when he was the one standing between Ava and Chloe. He had been a sickly child, his frail health compounded by severe asthma. The damp, rainy climate of New York was a constant trigger, so at 5 years old, his parents had sent him to live in the year-round spring of Santa Monica, under the care of his aunt, a doctor. That was when he met Ava and Chloe, who lived in the houses on either side of his aunt's. They were inseparable, the three of them growing up as childhood friends. From the moment they met, the girls were constantly by his side. In elementary school, they'd buy him breakfast, tear up any love letters he received from other girls, and jealously guard him from anyone who got too close. As they grew up, one became a renowned CEO who inherited her family's empire, and the other an internationally famous race car driver. Despite their demanding careers, they bought the houses on either side of his, knocked down the connecting walls, and moved in with him, insisting on cooking for him every night. When his health finally stabilized and his family started urging him to return to New York, they had both stood before him, eyes red, begging him not to leave. They'd sworn that if he went, they would drop everything and follow him. Wherever Ethan is, that's where we'll be, they always said. It was because of them, and only them, that he had delayed his return to New York for so long. But everything changed a month ago when Leo appeared. Leo was an intern Ethan was mentoring at his design firm. On his first day, he'd shyly refused to join the group for lunch, a pattern that continued until Ethan found him in a corner, quietly eating a cup of instant ramen. When asked, Leo explained he'd come from a poor, rural town, having earned a scholarship to the big city, and was saving every penny he could. Ethan, the privileged son of the wealthy Song family, had never encountered such hardship. His heart went out to the younger man, and he began looking out for him, occasionally inviting him to dinner with Ava and Chloe. And that's how Leo met them. Ava, with her cool demeanor, had never been one for loud, chaotic parties. Yet, for Leo, she made an exception. Chloe, who lived and breathed for the racetrack, could never be dissuaded from her passion by anyone. Yet now a single soft-spoken word from Leo was enough to make her give it up. Scenes like this had played out countless times over the past month. Before, Ava and Chloe had never hidden their feelings for Ethan. They had staged more than one dramatic showdown, demanding he choose between them. And Ethan had to admit, he had been genuinely moved, seriously considering which one of them he could build a life with. But now, accepting the marriage his family had arranged, it suddenly didn't seem like such a bad option. A bitter smile touched Ethan's lips as he pulled out his phone and set a countdown timer for his departure. From this day forward, he would no longer be an interruption in their new little trio. Ethan shut the door and put in his earbuds, blocking out the lively sounds from downstairs. Since he'd already decided to go back and get married, he had to quit his job, but he wanted to finish his current project first to avoid leaving a mess for anyone else. He sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, working alone as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. When the sky had darkened completely, Ethan took out his earbuds and stood to stretch. After hours of focused work, the project was finally done. The house below was now quiet. He instinctively unlocked his phone to unwind. A notification from Leo popped up. Ethan tapped it open. "How come you didn't like my post?" P. A minute later, another message followed. "Oops, sorry Ethan. Wrong person. Please don't be mad at me." Ethan navigated to Leo's Instagram profile, curious to see what he had posted. A 9-photo grid filled the screen. Each picture showcased the lavish gifts he'd received from Ava and Chloe. On Leo's wrist was a 7-figure Rolex. To complement it, Ava had given him a diamond tennis bracelet for his other wrist, which glittered ostentatiously under the light. The gleaming red sports car was obviously Chloe's gift. In the center photo, Leo stood beaming between Ava and Chloe, his arms linked with theirs, his smile radiating pure bliss. The caption read, "Guess I gotta be the prince for a day, Sparkles." Ethan knew Leo had posted this deliberately, hoping to get a rise out of him, to make him angry. The old Ethan would have been infuriated by this cloying, manipulative display and hurt that Ava and Chloe had given someone they'd known for less than a month the kind of attention once reserved exclusively for him. But the current Ethan was leaving. None of it mattered anymore. With a detached flick of his thumb, he tapped the screen. A red heart appeared under the post. From now on, he, Ava, and Chloe were just friends. Leo could have the privilege of choosing between them. The next day, Ethan went to his firm and submitted his resignation. Back home, he began gathering all the photos of the three of them together. They had known each other for over 20 years, filling more than a dozen thick albums. He opened one. There were pictures of them as kids, playing house in the backyard, photos from middle school, holding up trophies together, snapshots from a college road trip up the coast. Ethan flipped through them one by one, the memories so vivid they felt like they had happened yesterday. But now none of it was important. He took the pages out, one by one, lit a corner with a lighter, and dropped them into a metal trash can. A small bonfire flickered to life. The flames greedily consumed the images, curling the smiling faces into black ash. Ava and Chloe returned home just in time to see it. Realizing what he was doing, Ava strode over, her voice trembling slightly. "What are you doing?" Ethan glanced at her, his tone flat. "Nothing. They were starting to get moldy, so I figured I'd just burn them." Chloe lunged forward, trying to snatch the remaining photos from his hand. But Ethan, with a deliberate twitch of his wrist, let the rest of them fall into the flames. The fire flared, leaving no chance for a rescue. Chloe still made a desperate attempt to grab a corner of a picture that hadn't been fully consumed, but the intense heat forced her to recoil. "Even if they were moldy, you didn't have to burn them. Those are our memories," she cried, her eyes turning red with distress. Ava could only watch the fire, helpless and heartbroken. Hearing her, Ethan found it morbidly funny. Here he was, a living, breathing person they could hurt time and time again for Leo's sake, and yet they were breaking their hearts over a pile of old paper. He suddenly felt a flicker of curiosity. How would these two react if they knew he was leaving to get married? Staring at the two distraught women, he said calmly, "They're just pictures. We can always take more. There's nothing left to save, so I guess we'll have to." Ava conceded, choosing the next best option. Chloe quickly added, "We can bring Leo this time." He's always saying he's never really been on a real vacation. At the mention of Leo's name, another self-deprecating smile touched Ethan's lips. Ava and Chloe, however, took his silence as agreement and visibly relaxed. As they started to walk further into the house, they stopped short. Several large cardboard boxes were stacked in the living room, boxes that hadn't been there that morning. "What are these?" they asked in unison. Ethan glanced over. "Oh, that? I quit my job. Decided it was time for a change." Didn't he love that job? The same question echoed in both their minds. Ethan was acting strangely today. An unfamiliar sense of panic began to creep into their hearts. Chloe opened her mouth to ask more, but a sudden ringing shattered the tense quiet. Ava answered her phone. Leo's frantic, helpless voice came through the speaker. "Ava, the power went out at my place. I fell in the dark. I think I twisted my ankle. What should I do?" Standing beside her, Chloe's expression changed instantly. She snatched the phone. "Leo, it's okay. I'm on my way." Ava's brow furrowed, her usually calm face etched with clear anxiety. Concern for Leo won out. Grabbing their car keys, she and Chloe rushed for the door. Through it all, Ethan's expression remained placid. After they left, he dialed his aunt's number. He had lived with her for years, and she had always treated him like her own son. Now that he was leaving, he had to say a proper goodbye. Hearing that Ethan was returning to New York to get married, his aunt's voice filled with sadness, but also surprise. "Ethan, do Ava and Chloe know about this?" Ethan paused for a moment. "They don't. Aunt Sarah, could you keep it a secret for me? I don't want any more drama." A moment of silence passed on the other end. His aunt sighed deeply. "I suppose you're right. Those two girls have adored you since you were children. Anyone could see it. You three were always together. I really thought you'd end up marrying one of them. What a shame." Ethan managed a small smile. "It's not a shame. We just weren't right for each other." His aunt didn't press the issue. "Ethan, I always knew you'd go home eventually. I just didn't think it would be so soon. I watched you grow up. You have to come see me before you go. If you're back in New York, who knows when we'll see each other again." Ethan's tone softened with affection. "I will, Aunt Sarah. I have some gifts for you, too. I'll miss you so much." After a few more minutes of fond chatter, they hung up. The moment he ended the call, another one came in. It was the director from his firm. "Ethan, that design you submitted won the company a major award. The trophy just came in, but you'd already left. I had your intern, Leo, drop it off at your house." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Ethan hung up and opened the door to find Leo standing there, holding a crystal trophy. Leo clutched the award, his face showing no hint of happiness for Ethan's achievement. He made no move to hand it over. Instead, he looked up with a pitiable expression. "Ethan, the director asked me to bring this to you. This is a really prestigious award. You're so amazing." He paused, then said, "I know this is a long shot, but I've never won anything like this. Could I maybe borrow the trophy for a few days?" Borrow it? It was the most absurd request Ethan had ever heard. His brow furrowed, and a humorless smile touched his lips. "If you know it's a long shot, then you shouldn't have asked. If you want one so badly, go win one yourself." He reached out to take the award from Leo's arms. Stung by Ethan's cold refusal, Leo's face flushed, and he looked utterly victimized. "Ethan, why would you say that? I'm not trying to take it from you. I just want to put it in my house for a few days for inspiration. Is that so wrong?" As Ethan's hand moved closer, Leo clutched the trophy tighter, refusing to let go. In the ensuing struggle, the crystal award slipped. It hit the floor with a sickening crash and shattered into 1,000 pieces. Just then, Ava and Chloe walked up the path. Seeing the scene, they rushed forward. "Leo!" They flanked him, their faces masks of panic, carefully checking him for any injuries. Ava lifted Leo's pant leg and saw a gash on his shin, bleeding from a shard of glass. Her eyes narrowed in distress. "I'm taking you to the hospital." Ignoring Leo's protests, she forcefully helped him up and led him toward her car. Chloe stared at the glittering debris on the ground, her face dark with anger. She turned on Ethan. "You have everything, Ethan. Why do you still have to fight with Leo over something like this?" "Fight with him?" The word was so preposterous Ethan almost laughed. "This is my award," he said, his body trembling with rage. He pointed a shaking finger at the floor. "The result of 3 months of sleepless nights. It's my achievement, my honor." And he was clinging to it like a spoiled child, refusing to let it go. "And you say I'm fighting with him?" He was so furious his voice was like ice. "Now he's broken it. I want an apology from him." He thought his words would have made the situation perfectly clear, but they only made Chloe angrier. Her voice rose several octaves. "I thought it was something important. It's just a trophy. You can win as many as you want. How can that possibly compare to Leo? You got him hurt. I think you're the one who should be apologizing to him." Without waiting for a response, Chloe hurried after Ava to help take care of Leo. Ethan stared at the wreckage on the floor, stunned. Chloe's words echoed in his mind. "You should apologize to Leo? The victim should apologize to the perpetrator. Chloe, you've really outdone yourself." A sharp pain lanced through his own heart. A moment later, a dull ache registered in his leg. He looked down and saw for the first time that his own calf had been sliced open by a piece of a shattered trophy. The wound was long and deep, bleeding freely, far worse than Leo's minor scratch. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Ethan cleaned up the broken crystal before turning to limp back inside and tend his own injury. That evening, he received a message from his mother. She had sent photos of more than a dozen different tuxedo options, asking him to pick his favorite. He looked through them all before calling her. They had only spoken for a minute when his mother picked up on the exhaustion in his voice. "What happened, sweetheart?" The day's injustice rose in his throat like bile, but he swallowed it down and changed the subject. "Mom, I should be able to wrap everything up here in about a week. How are the wedding preparations coming along?" Just then, Ava and Chloe came home. They caught the last two words of his sentence. "Wedding?" they asked in unison. "What wedding?" The phone in Ethan's hand was somehow already disconnected. He took a moment to compose himself before turning to them. "A friend of mine is getting married." "Why? You want to come?" Ava and Chloe had grown so cold to him lately. Once he was back in New York, they would never see each other again. They wouldn't even be friends. There was no point in telling them the truth. Hearing his explanation, Ava and Chloe exchanged a look, a flicker of something unreadable in their eyes. But they didn't press it. "No, I'm too busy with work," Ava said dismissively, still clearly angry about what had happened to Leo. She picked up a file and disappeared into her study. Chloe's face was a stony mask. "You hurt Leo today. You'd better go apologize to him. Otherwise, I have zero interest in going to some wedding with you." With that, she stalked off to her room. Ethan let out a humorless laugh, saying nothing. The next morning, Ethan woke early to make breakfast. As he walked into the living room, he was met with an overwhelming sight. More than a dozen vases, all overflowing with fresh flowers, their potent fragrance filling the air. Pollen, thick and suffocating, drifted towards him on the breeze. Ethan's face went white. His breathing grew rapid and shallow. He was having an asthma attack. He was severely allergic to pollen. He gasped desperately, his chest heaving, dark spots dancing in his vision. The air he sucked and felt thinner and thinner, his lungs burning. Inhaler. Forcing his trembling legs to move, he stumbled toward the medicine cabinet, his memory guiding him. His hands fumbled blindly, his strength failing. He accidentally knocked several of the vases off a nearby shelf. Crash! The vases shattered on the floor, spilling water and flowers everywhere. Hearing the noise, Ava and Chloe rushed out of their rooms. They saw the mess on the floor, and their faces contorted with fury, completely missing Ethan's desperate state. "What are you doing?" Ethan had just managed to get his hands on his inhaler and had no energy to answer them. But Chloe, her expression frantic, rushed past him and shoved him aside. She knelt, trying to salvage the flowers from the floor. Ugh, already weak. Ethan was sent sprawling by the hard push. His knee slammed into the corner of a cabinet, the impact scraping off a layer of skin and leaving a raw, swelling bruise. Clutching the inhaler, his hands shaking uncontrollably, he finally managed to get the cap off and find the nozzle. It was a lifeline. He took a deep, shuddering puff, then another before staggering to a corner of the room, away from the pollen. The medicine hit his raw, constricted airways, bringing a small measure of relief. He had barely managed to cheat death, but when he looked up, Ava and Chloe were still preoccupied with cleaning up the flowers and broken glass. As soon as Ethan had recovered enough to breathe, he leaned against the wall, cupping his hand over his face to block any more pollen. Before he could even catch his breath, Ava's accusatory voice cut through the air. "Are you really this obsessed with targeting Leo? He brings us these flowers as a gift, and you immediately smash them?" Chloe's furious voice followed. "Ethan, I'm starting to think you're losing your mind. When did you become like this?" Hearing them, Ethan's entire body trembled with a rage so profound he felt speechless. 1,000 angry rebuttals died on his tongue. All that came out was a raw, red-eyed shout. "I've changed. Have I changed, or have you?" His voice was weak, lacking any force, but the words hit Ava and Chloe like a thunderclap. "I have asthma. I'm allergic to pollen. Did you two forget that?" They were the ones who used to be the most frantic about his health. Every time he'd had an attack, they would be the first to panic, climbing out of their classroom windows and skipping school to rush to his side, staying by his bed, fetching him water, refusing to leave. And now, they had forgotten something so fundamental. A flicker of guilt crossed Ava's face. After a moment, her cool expression softened with a hint of apology. Sorry. Chloe's sharp brow furrowed. The memory of Ethan's past attacks, of the agony he went through, flashed in her mind. She took a tentative step forward. Are you okay? I'm sorry. Leo picked these himself from the wild. He put so much heart into it. That's why I was so upset. Ethan said nothing. Seeing that he had used his inhaler and his color was returning to normal, Ava and Chloe quickly gathered up the flowers and took them outside. For the next several days, neither of them came home. The lights in their wings of the house remained dark. Ethan didn't care. He was busy packing his own things. When most of his luggage was ready, he took a moment to look around the sprawling house. He had bought the central part first. Then, to be closer to him, Ava and Chloe had bought the adjacent properties, and they'd knocked down the walls to create the massive, unified home they now shared. Only a third of it was legally his. Selling it was going to be complicated. A few days later, Ava and Chloe finally returned, just as a real estate agent was meeting with Ethan. Seeing a stranger in the house, Ava's face instantly chilled. Who are you, and what are you doing here? Faced with two intimidating women, the young agent stammered. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm from the real estate agency. The owner of this property contacted us about selling the house. Selling the house. Ava and Chloe looked at each other, shock registering on both their faces. Their expressions hardened as they were about to kick the man out, but then Ethan came down the stairs. It was me, he said. I'm selling it. I was just about to talk to you both about it. His words hit them like a physical blow. Their hearts seized. Why would you sell? They asked in unison. We're perfectly happy here. Chloe, connecting the dots to the flower incident, asked bluntly, Are you still angry about what happened the other day? She was clearly panicked, offering a rare apology. We didn't mean to forget about your allergy. Do you have to be this extreme? Ethan calmly shook his head. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with you. I don't want any part of this anymore. But he didn't say that aloud. Instead, he offered, I quit my job. I'll be working somewhere else, so it doesn't make sense to live here anymore. Besides, we've lived together for years. We don't need to be attached at the hip forever. Ava's face was grim. She refused to back down. If it's about work, Chloe and I can drive you. That's not a problem. And you said it yourself. We've lived together for years. We're used to it. Why would we separate now? Yeah, Ava and I are here for you. We can even get a driver. I don't agree to this, Chloe added, her arms crossed. Seeing that he couldn't convince them, Ethan rubbed his temples, baffled by their insistence. He decided to play his trump card. Fine. In that case, let's sell this place and buy something even bigger. Then we can have Leo move in with us. At the mention of Leo's name, both of their eyes lit up. They hesitated. Chloe was the first to cave. Well, if that's the plan, I guess it's not out of the question. Only Ava, ever the strategist, watched him with a complex, searching look in her eyes. You'd be willing to have Leo live with us. For some reason, she felt like something was off, that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Before she could think it through, Ethan let out a small laugh. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? We're all friends. He made a snap decision. So that's settled. We sell this house and find a new one. With that, Ava and Chloe fell silent, their objections gone. With the house situation finally resolved, a wave of relief washed over Ethan. A huge weight had lifted from his shoulders. While signing the papers, he noticed that the closing date for the property transfer was the same day he was scheduled to leave. Perfect. It would save him the trouble of explaining anything to Ava and Chloe. The moment his signature dried on the contract, he felt a profound sense of freedom. Soon, it would all be over. There was only one last thing to do. He went to a high-end department store, carefully selected a massage chair and a pair of jade bangles, and drove to his aunt's house. The moment he walked in, Aunt Sarah pulled him into a tight hug. Oh, Ethan, I'm going to miss you so much. You've been in Santa Monica for so long. I've come to see you as my own son. It's not going to feel right with you gone. She wiped a tear from her eye, her hand gripping his tightly. Ethan felt a lump form in his own throat. He forced a smile to reassure her. I'll miss you too, Aunt Sarah, but we're family. Flights and trains are easy. We'll see each other for the holidays. Aunt Sarah, knowing he was right, gradually composed herself and pushed him down onto the sofa. You sit right there. I knew you were leaving, so I took a few days off work. You're staying with me for a few days, and I'm going to cook all your favorite foods. She gave him no room to refuse, bustling into the kitchen. Soon, the aroma of his favorite dishes filled the air. Watching his aunt fuss over him, a genuine smile touched Ethan's lips. He couldn't argue with her, so he agreed to stay for a few days to keep her company. Finally, with his departure date looming, He couldn't delay any longer. He said his goodbyes, his heart heavy. Aunt Sarah, I have to go. My wedding is in 3 days, back in New York. Aunt Sarah fought back her tears, nodding repeatedly. She pressed a thick, red envelope into his hand. I have 3 surgeries that day, Ethan. I can't get away. But this is a little something for me. You have to be happy, you hear me? Ethan's eyes reddened as he accepted the gift. I will be Aunt Sarah. Grandpa picked her out for me. You can rest easy. Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Ava and Chloe stepped out, with Leo trailing between them. The first thing they saw was Ethan, his eyes red, saying an emotional farewell to his aunt. A strange feeling sank in both their hearts, and they spoke without thinking. Ethan? Aunt Sarah? Why are you crying? Seeing them, Ethan quickly wiped his eyes and adopted a calm expression. It's nothing. It's just been a while since I've seen my aunt. I have to leave now, so I'm just a little sad. His explanation seemed to satisfy them. The tension in Ava and Chloe's shoulders eased. You're both in Santa Monica. You're not that far apart. You can see her whenever you want. Aunt Sarah looked at the 2 women, who were still completely in the dark, and imagined how they would react when they found out the truth. She looked like she was about to say something, but Ethan quickly changed the subject, turning his gaze to Leo. So what are you all up to? Ava and Chloe snapped back to reality, a hint of panic in their expressions as they rushed to explain. It's Thanksgiving today. Leo was all alone, so we brought him home to celebrate with our families. Yeah, don't get the wrong idea, Chloe added quickly. We tried calling you, but you didn't answer. They were flustered because, in years past, Thanksgiving was a battleground. They would both fight over who got to bring Ethan home to their family dinner. Bringing someone home on a holiday meant for family reunion was a clear statement. This was the person they wanted to marry. Ethan always found it exhausting, having to go to the Liu family's dinner first, then rush over to the cheese. This year, however, they had brought Leo. The meaning was unmistakable. Ethan didn't call them on it. He just said coolly, I see. That's nice. You all have a good time. I'm going to go home and finish packing. He turned to leave, but Ava and Chloe both called out to him. Ethan, Ethan. Ethan turned around. Seeing that he wasn't angry, they both breathed a sigh of relief. Ava stepped forward and took his hand. Don't worry about your luggage. It's too much to handle on your own. I'll have my driver come by, and we'll all move everything to the new house together. Chloe nodded in agreement. For a fleeting moment, Ethan saw a glimpse of the past in their eyes, the way they used to look at him when he was their entire world. A bittersweet memory of a time when their days were filled with laughter and promises. But those youthful vows had now evaporated into thin air. Ethan's gaze flickered to Leo, and he gently pulled his hand away. No, that's okay. There are a lot of things I need to sort through myself. He turned and walked away, ignoring the looks on their faces. Back at his empty house, he finished organizing his bags, took a shower, and had just settled in a bed when his phone rang. It was Leo. His voice, oozing with unconcealed triumph, came through the receiver. Hey, Ethan, I just wanted to let you know, I went to both Ava's and Chloe's family dinners tonight. Their parents were so nice to me. He paused for effect. They both showed me their family heirlooms and said they wanted to give them to me. What do you think that means? Do you think they... Ethan cut him off flatly. I'm not interested in your life. You don't need to tell me any of this. It has nothing to do with me. He hung up before Leo could say another word. The day before his flight, Ethan went out. He had made plans to have a farewell dinner with his friend Max. He didn't have many friends in Santa Monica. From a young age, Ava and Chloe had strictly policed his social circle, forbidding him from having girlfriends, intercepting love letters, and even meddling in his friendships with other boys. Ethan, are we enough for you? They would say, their eyes wide and pleading. You're so wonderful. We're afraid other boys will fall for you too. Their possessiveness was terrifying. They wanted to be the only thing he could see. And now, they were the ones who had pushed him away. A new upscale steakhouse downtown, Max was already waiting. As soon as he saw Ethan, he pulled him into a big hug. Man, I can't believe you're really going back to New York to get married. I'm gonna miss you. He sighed, slumping back in his chair. I really thought you'd end up with Ava or Chloe and stay in Santa Monica for good. We could have kept hanging out. Ethan offered a faint smile. They have other options now. And so do I. At that, Max deflated. He thought of Leo, and his expression soured. You were so good to that Leo guy, and he just... Ethan held up a hand, a genuine smile on his face. Let's not talk about insignificant people. Once I'm married, I won't ever have to see him again. Whatever games he plays will have nothing to do with me. Just as the words left his mouth, Leo walked into the restaurant. Since Ethan and Max's table was near the entrance, Leo overheard the last part of their conversation. He walked over, his face a mask of innocent curiosity. Ethan, who's getting married? Can I come? I've never been to a real wedding before. Ethan had rarely met someone with such a complete lack of boundaries, but perhaps he was just used to Leo's antics by now. And since he was leaving, he felt nothing but calm. Max, however, was furious. He slammed his fork down on the table and glared at Leo. It's my wedding. And no, you're not invited. Satisfied? His voice was loud, dripping with contempt. Do you have any concept of personal space? Do we look like we're friends? Why do you have to stick your nose in everything? If a garbage truck drove by, would you run out with a spoon to check if the swill was salty enough? The harsh words made Leo physically flinch as if he'd been struck. He lowered his head, his eyes welling up as he looked toward the restaurant entrance, where Ava and Chloe had just appeared. His large, expressive eyes were a silent plea for help. Ava, not knowing what had transpired, saw only Leo's wounded expression. Her face hardened, and she immediately pulled him into a protective embrace. I'm here. If you want to go to a wedding, you could go to any wedding you want. Chloe rushed to his other side. Me too. Forget a wedding. If you wanted a star, I'd climb a ladder to heaven and pick you a fresh one. Don't pay any attention to irrelevant people. Flanked by the two women, Leo's tears gave way to a triumphant smile. With that, Ava and Chloe led Leo to the table right next to Ethan's. Both women fussed over him, filling his plate with food, their eyes soft with adoration. Across the small space, Max was so angry he stabbed his steak until it was shredded, but Ethan remained as serene as a calm lake. Seeing his friend's composure, Max swallowed his anger and said nothing more. After dinner, the two friends said their goodbyes. Ethan returned to the empty house. That night, Ava and Chloe didn't come home again. Ethan didn't care. He was busy with his final packing. The next morning, he heard footsteps outside his room and knew they were back. They would have to be. Today was the day they were all supposed to move into the new house. What they didn't know was that their new house and their future would not include him. The noise outside grew louder as movers began their work. Ethan ignored it. After checking his suitcases one last time, his mother called. He answered, and her warm voice filled the line. Ethan, what time does your flight land? We'll be at the airport to pick you up. Ethan pulled up his ticket information on his phone. I should be there around 7 tonight. Just then, his bedroom door pushed open. He glanced over and saw Ava and Chloe standing in the doorway. Chloe asked casually, Who are you talking to? No one important, Ethan said coolly, ending the call. His chilly tone caught them off guard. Ever since Leo had shown up, Ethan had seemed so distant. Ava, who normally wouldn't have bothered to explain herself, felt a growing sense of panic as she recalled Ethan's recent strange behavior. Ethan, she began, Leo is different from you. He didn't have a good childhood. His family is poor. That's why I feel a need to help him. It's nothing more than that. Chloe jumped in. Yeah, we just feel sorry for him. Besides, you were the one who introduced him to us in the first place. How can you be jealous of him? Ethan's expression was unreadable. Why are you telling me this? Because you care, they said in unison. They had grown up together. They knew him so well that they could finish his sentences, could anticipate his needs before he even voiced them. How could they not sense that he cared? And yet, lately, he had become a complete enigma. A frosty glint appeared in Ethan's eyes, as if he were looking at two strangers. I don't care. You said you just see him as a friend, right? I'm your friend, too. So what is there for me to be upset about? For a moment, they were speechless. Ava finally broke the silence. Ethan, you know that's not what I want. I've never wanted to just be your friend. Chloe couldn't hide her emotion. All these years, Ethan, how could you possibly think we're just friends? Ethan knew exactly what they were talking about. They both loved him, wanted to be with him. But if their love meant siding with Leo while he bullied him, then it was a love he couldn't bear. He nodded slowly. Yes, we are about to have a different kind of relationship. Soon, we won't even be friends. We'll be strangers. His words were loaded. Ava's heart gave a violent lurch, and a wave of unease washed over her. Before she could speak, a mover appeared in the doorway, ready to take Ethan's luggage. Ethan stopped him. You all go on ahead. I'll bring my things over myself. Chloe's frustration boiled over. How are you going to get all this stuff there? Stop throwing a tantrum. It was my fault, okay? I'm sorry. Ethan was firm. I really don't need any help. You should go help Leo. He's all alone, his leg is hurt, and he's so delicate. He can't carry anything himself. He needs you more than I do. Ava heard the sarcasm dripping from his words. She frowned. Just then, her phone rang. It was Leo. Ava? Chloe? Can you guys come help me? I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy. I can't seem to do anything right. His fragile, wounded voice carried clearly from the phone's speaker. Ava and Chloe exchanged a look. They glanced at Ethan's resolute expression, then back at each other. They made their decision. Ava ended the call and looked at Ethan. Leo can't manage on his own. I'm going to go help him. Chloe grabbed her car keys. I'll go too. As she was about to leave, Ava hesitated and looked back. Ethan, I know you won't listen right now. I've booked a table at a restaurant. After we're all moved in, we'll have a nice dinner, just a few of us. We could talk about Leo, then. I'll explain everything. Before Ethan could answer, she was gone. Watching their retreating backs, a wry smile played on Ethan's lips. Explain later? Too bad for them. There was no later. Besides, after everything they had done, what could they possibly say that would explain it all away? His phone vibrated. Another message from Leo, brimming with provocation. Sorry about that, Ethan. Didn't think one little call from me would be enough to make Ava and Chloe ditch you again. Looking forward to the 4 of us living together. Winky face. Ethan's smile widened. His fingers tapped lightly on the screen. The most important thing is that the 3 of you are happy together. I won't get in the way. The moment the message sent, he blocked Leo's number. Then he blocked Ava's. And finally Chloe's. He methodically cleared the list, erasing the 3 people who had once been his world. Then he picked up his suitcase, walked out of the house that held a lifetime of memories, and didn't look back. Ethan boarded the plane without a second thought, completely unconcerned with how Ava and Chloe might react. As the plane lifted off the runway, a sense of liberation he hadn't felt in years washed over him. Meanwhile, back in Santa Monica, the atmosphere in the new Palisades Point house was suffocatingly tense. 3 hours had passed. Ava and Chloe had arrived at the sprawling villa with Leo, but there was still no sign of Ethan. Only their luggage sat in the cavernous entry hall. Ethan's was nowhere to be found. A sharp, unfamiliar panic gripped Ava. She felt as if something irreversible was happening. Chloe sat on a plush sofa, her face unusually pale. Leo, knowing exactly what was going on, remained silent. He was the first to break the tension. Maybe Ethan is still packing. Why don't we have the workers start arranging our things? We have that dinner reservation tonight, right? Ethan would never forget that. Ava nodded, but the gnawing anxiety in her gut wouldn't subside. She remained frozen, even as every instinct screamed at her to go find him. Chloe stared at her phone. The screen showed a long list of unanswered calls to Ethan, a mirror image of the one on Ava's phone. She couldn't sit still any longer. She snatched her jacket from a nearby chair and strode towards the door. Something might have happened to Ethan. She threw over her shoulder. I'm going back to the old house to check. Ava couldn't stay either. Sorry, Leo, she said, her voice strained. I'm going too. Make yourself at home. I'll be back soon. Ava, Chloe. Leo called after them, but they didn't turn around. The old house was empty, stripped bare. They drove their luxury cars all over Santa Monica, searching every place they could think of, but found no trace of him. Defeated, they both ended up back at the now vacant house. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Mr. Zhang, I need to find out where Ethan's song is. Now. A few minutes later, Mr. Zhang called back. Ms. Liu, Mr. Song was on a flight to New York City today. At this time, he should have already landed. The word struck Ava and Chloe like a physical blow. Their minds went blank. They stood frozen in the empty house, thunderstruck. What? How is that possible? No, Chloe refused to believe it. Why would Ethan suddenly go back to New York? He promised he'd always stay with us in Santa Monica. Mr. Zhang, are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Ava's voice was low and dangerous. Zhang, check again. Confirm it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When the assistant spoke again, his voice was trembling. Ms. Liu, Ms. Chi, there's no mistake. He forwarded the flight information to Ava's phone. It was all there in black and white, undeniable. Ava thought she might be hallucinating. She looked at Chloe and saw the same incredulous shock reflected in her eyes. Clatter. The phone slipped from her numb fingers and crashed onto the hardwood floor. Their minds were a chaotic mess. They never, in their wildest dreams, thought Ethan would actually leave. Just a few hours ago, weren't they talking about moving into their new home together? The memory of Ethan's strange, detached behavior as they were leaving the old house flooded her mind. And then Chloe's eyes widened as she remembered. The last words she had overheard from his phone call that morning became terrifyingly clear. Everything is ready. I'm about to leave. I'll be there around 7 tonight. It all hit Chloe at once. A delayed reaction that brought every strange thing about Ethan's behavior over the past month rushing to the forefront of her mind. Ava was silent beside her. He must have been planning to leave for weeks. Could Liu Xiong really have had that much of an impact on him? As if on cue, Leo's name lit up Chloe's phone. Chloe? Ava? I'm at the restaurant. What happened to our celebration? Where are you guys? Chloe held the phone, the words catching in her throat. After a long moment, She answered, her voice raspy. Leo, let's cancel. We'll talk later. What was the point of celebrating when Ethan was gone? Ava remained quiet, her gaze fixed on the shattered phone on the ground, her expression unreadable. Just then, the familiar realtor walked up the path, guiding a woman in a gray coat. Ma'am, as you can see, this house. He was in the middle of his sales pitch when he noticed them. He stopped, a flicker of confusion on his face. Ms. Loomis. Gee, what are you doing here? He looked from them to the house and back. I thought the sale was final. You were supposed to be. He trailed off, worried, craning his neck to see if the moving trucks had cleared everything out. The sale is off. I'm buying it, Ava said, her voice devoid of hesitation. The realtor stared as if he'd just seen a ghost. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed to stammer. Ms. Lou, are you serious? Of course I'm serious. Draw up the papers. Ava's brow furrowed, her tone unwavering. The words draw up the papers snapped the realtor out of his daze. A wide grin spread across his face. Yes, of course. Right away. You could just sign right here. Ava gave the contract a cursory glance, confirmed the details, and decisively signed her name. Chloe didn't object. As long as the house didn't fall into a stranger's hands, that was enough. Their friendship was strong enough that living there together would be as simple as just saying the word. The house held too many of their shared memories. If Ethan had moved with them to the Palisades Point house, this place wouldn't have mattered as much. Having him was what was important. But now that he was gone, they couldn't bear to lose the memories, too. They sat on the floor of the empty house until late into the night. It was hollowed out, everything of value moved, everything else hauled away and discarded. Every trace of Ethan was gone. A profound loneliness settled over Ava and Chloe. When Ethan was around, it felt like they had an endless supply of things to say, always finding new ways to make him smile. Now, with just the two of them, the silence was a vast, empty space. They looked at each other, but the desire to speak was gone. Leo's name flashed on Chloe's screen again and again, but she ignored every call. The Palisades Point house felt just as cold and empty as the one they'd left behind. It didn't seem to matter where they were. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, they couldn't stand it any longer and drove back to the new house. The moment they opened the door, the first thing they saw was Leo, fast asleep on the sofa. The warm, yellow light from the lamps cast a glow that should have been cozy, but neither Ava nor Chloe was in the mood to appreciate it. Why are you still up? Chloe's voice was laced with exhaustion and a clear note of irritation. She didn't have the energy to deal with another person's feelings. Ava walked straight toward her room without a second glance. You should go to bed, she said coldly over her shoulder. Don't wait up for us again. Leo, nestled in the plush sofa, blinked in bewilderment. What has happened? Ava and Chloe had been so warm to him before. Could Ethan's departure really have turned them this cold? He paced back and forth in the hall between their rooms, a new resolve hardening in his mind. Back in his own room, Leo quickly opened his phone and deleted the provocative messages he'd sent to Ethan. It was one thing for Ethan to leave of his own accord. It was another entirely for him to be driven away by Leo. Ava lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind a complete blank. Ethan was gone, but he'd never once told them exactly where his family lived in New York City. The Song family was prominent in New York's high society. Finding them wouldn't be difficult. But he had hidden his plans to leave. Didn't that mean he didn't want them to find him? The thought sent a sharp, stabbing pain through her chest. Chloe couldn't sit still. She dialed Aunt Sarah, needing to know why Ethan had left, why he had vanished without a word. The phone was answered after a few rings. Aunt Sarah was on a night shift, just out of surgery. A young intern held the phone for her while she was still pulling off her gloves. Hello? Chloe, honey, is everything okay? The three of them had grown up together, so Chloe and Ava had always called her Aunt Sarah, just like Ethan did. Aunt Sarah, do you know Ethan's address in New York? Chloe's words tumbled out in a rush. Why did he leave so suddenly? I have to go find him. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. You don't know why he left? Aunt Sarah asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. When he told me, he said you and Ava both knew. In that instant, they both understood. Ethan Heartless. Realizing her mistake, Aunt Sarah, loyal to her nephew, quickly tried to backtrack. Oh, Chloe, my mistake. I must be confused. Ethan just wanted to go see his parents. It's been so many years, and you girls are so busy, he probably just didn't want to bother you. The excuse was flimsy, and it didn't convince Chloe for a second. Is that so? Even though she didn't believe it, Chloe knew she wouldn't get the truth from Aunt Sarah. But the realization that Ethan had hidden this only from them was a bitter pill to swallow. Going home to see his parents? It was a pathetically weak excuse. If that was all it was, why would he have hidden it? Something much bigger had to be happening. Chloe couldn't wait another second. She threw on a jacket and headed for the door. But as she stepped outside, she saw Ava leaning against her car, a small pile of cigarette ash on the pavement by her feet. Seeing Chloe, Ava quickly stubbed out the cigarette. You ready? I bought us tickets for the first flight to New York. We're going to find him. We have a better chance if we go together. Chloe didn't need to think. She nodded, her mind already racing. They jumped into the car, and Chloe floored it, turning the short drive to the airport into a high-speed chase, weaving through traffic as if she were on a racetrack. They arrived at LAX with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a single, frantic thought consuming them. Get to New York and find Ethan. They were terrified that if they were even a moment too late, something irreversible would happen. As their plane took off, the sky was just beginning to lighten with the first blush of dawn. Ava and Chloe were a bundle of raw nerves, unable to find a moment of peace. At that same moment, across the country in New York City, Ethan was also wide awake after a sleepless night. He was already up, getting dressed, a makeup artist dabbing concealer under his eyes. Today was the day he and Lillian Gu were getting their marriage license. He could count on one hand the number of times he'd actually met her. He couldn't believe his arranged marriage was to her. The name Lillian Gu had been a constant refrain from the older generation of the Song family, always held up as the gold standard, the most brilliant of her peers. His own parents had spoken of her with undisguised admiration during their rare phone calls. Ethan's only memory of her was of a little girl who always seemed so serious but had a surprising habit of pinching his cheeks. Still, even if he were marrying a complete stranger, he couldn't stop the nervous tremor in his hands. It was, after all, a first for him. He checked his reflection one last time. The clock struck 9. He rose, took Lillian's offered hand, and they got in the car headed for City Hall. Sensing his tension, Lillian seemed to produce a few pieces of candy from nowhere, pressing them into his palm. If you're nervous, something sweet helps. Her gaze was steady and gentle, her expression resolute. Ethan felt himself getting lost in that calm, his head spinning. He mechanically unwrapped a piece of candy and popped it into his mouth. It melted on his tongue, a wave of sweetness that seemed to seep directly into his heart. Maybe this whole arranged marriage thing wouldn't be so bad after all. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. He felt light, as if he were walking on clouds. He let Lillian lead him into the city clerk's office, guide his hand for the signatures, and position him for the official photo. Seeing how stiff he was, a small smile played on Lillian's lips. The official stamp came down with a thud. 2 freshly issued marriage certificates were placed in their hands. Ethan felt like he was in a dream. The next second, 2 voices shattered the illusion, crying out his name in unison. Ethan! Ethan! Ava and Chloe skidded to a halt in front of him, chests heaving as they gasped for breath. Their eyes locked on the marriage certificates in his hand, the official documents a glaring, painful red against his pale skin. Their vision narrowed until that splash of red was all they could see. Ava's voice was a raw whisper, her face a mask of disbelief. Ethan, you got married. She didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying the sight of Ethan's arm around Lillian's waist or the matching rings on their fingers. Chloe stood frozen, a storm of emotions warring on her face. She finally managed a smile that was more painful than a sob. Her lips moved, but it took a few tries for the sound to come out. Ethan, where did you hire this actress? The performance isn't very convincing. Stop trying to trick us. Even with the rings and the certificate right in front of her, she refused to believe it. Ethan hadn't expected to see them so soon, but it didn't matter. He was done with them. She's not an actress, he said, his tone flat. Sorry to disappoint you, but as you can see, I'm married. He calmly held up the certificate, waving it slightly in front of their faces. Lillian leaned into his embrace, a model of composure. She gave them a polite, formal nod. Hello, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Lillian Gu, Ethan's wife. Her eyes, a striking amber, swept over Ava and Chloe. The look was fleeting, but it carried a natural, dismissive superiority. Ava's pupils contracted, a spark of nameless fury igniting in her chest. She struggled to control her voice, keeping her eyes locked on Ethan. Ethan, stop this. Are you doing this to make us jealous? It's not funny. You don't mean this. You need to go back in there and get this annulled. You're not thinking straight. She reached for his arm, trying to pull him back toward the clerk's office. Chloe moved to block Lillian. Ms. Gu, what gives you the right to marry Ethan? Chloe's voice rose, edged with hysteria. Do you even know him? Do you know what he likes? All his little quirks? Do you love him? She punctuated the questions by grabbing Lillian's shoulder. Lillian didn't flinch. She sidestepped Chloe's grasp with effortless grace. Ms. Chi, Ethan and I can build a relationship. A marriage of convenience that grows into love isn't the worst thing in the world. But you and Ms. Liu haven't even sorted out your own affairs. From what I understand, you're in some kind of messy entanglement with Liu Xiang. How can you possibly stand here and challenge me? She brushed her shoulder pointedly, as if removing a speck of dirt where Chloe had touched her. At the mention of Leo's name, both Ava and Chloe hesitated. We just feel sorry for him, Chloe stammered. We don't have any other feelings for him. Ethan pulled his arm from Ava's grasp and stepped closer to Lillian. That's enough. Ava, Chloe, he said coldly. You don't have to explain anything to me. His expression was distant, as if he were looking at two strangers. The moment I left Santa Monica, we were done. Whether you like Liu Xiang or not has nothing to do with me. Don't come looking for me again. New York isn't your territory. As he finished speaking, Lillian snapped her fingers. A line of men in matching dark suits materialized from the crowd. Take them away, she commanded. Escort them back to Santa Monica, and make sure they stay there. Her words represented his. Ethan didn't object. He didn't even move. His silence was a resounding endorsement. Chloe stared in disbelief, struggling as the guards took her arms. Her eyes were wide and red with fury. Ethan, you can't go with her. Come back to Santa Monica with us. We'll be good to you. We can go back to how things were, please. No, Ethan said, without a flicker of hesitation. I have my parents and my family here in New York. Santa Monica, I'm tired of it. A strange smile touched Ava's lips before her expression hardened into a cold mask. Ethan, I will make you regret this. You'll come crawling back to us. I wouldn't count on it, Lillian replied smoothly. I won't give you the chance. She gestured with her finger, and the bodyguards efficiently gagged both Ava and Chloe, bound their hands and feet, and bundled them into a waiting helicopter. As they were taken away, Lillian turned to Ethan, a flicker of anxiety in her eyes. Was that too much? Do you think I'm too aggressive? Not gentle at all. She hadn't gotten a foothold in the powerful Gu family by being soft, but she hadn't wanted to show that side of herself to Ethan. Ethan looked at her, and in that moment, the vast distance he'd felt between them seemed to shrink. He smiled and shook his head. Not all. It was the perfect way to handle it. 2 fewer problems to worry about. He hadn't expected them to actually follow him. In his mind, with him out of the way, they would finally feel free to pursue Leo. They were all living together. Wasn't it just a matter of time? Especially since Leo was clearly interested. They're just not used to me being gone, Ethan told himself. You can get attached to a photograph if you keep it for a few years. It was only natural to feel the absence of someone you'd known for over 20 years. But habits, given enough time, could always be broken. He followed Lillian home. Inside the helicopter, the thunderous roar of the rotors was a chaotic match for the storm in Ava and Chloe's minds. What had they even come here for? They had accomplished nothing. They were just one step too late. How could Ethan be married? They remembered how he would blush and get flustered whenever they subtly hinted at their feelings. They both knew how torn he was, trapped in an impossible position where choosing one of them would have deeply hurt the other. That was why he'd never made a choice. Sometimes, he'd even said he wished they could all stay friends forever, that maybe that would be enough. Because his feelings for either of them had never quite crossed the line into true, romantic love. Ava and Chloe knew that. They felt the same way, terrified of destroying the precious bond they all shared. So they had made a decision. They were going to force Ethan's hand. And just then, Liu Xiang had appeared. His act was clumsy. A little digging was all it took to discover his background was nothing like the sob story he'd sold them. He came from a small, rural town, his parents migrant workers who, despite their poverty, had scraped together enough to send him to college, even paying for art and design classes. The moment he graduated, he borrowed a large sum of money from them and cut off all contact. Then he'd latched onto Ethan at work. Ava and Chloe had only meant to use him as a pawn, a tool to make Ethan take a hard look at his own heart, to feel a pang of jealousy, and finally, to choose one of them. Ava and Chloe had made a pact. No matter who Ethan chose, the other would have to swallow her feelings and step back, becoming just a friend. But they had never, ever imagined he would choose neither of them. How did it come to this? Why did their gambit end in complete disaster? They looked at each other, and for the first time, a sliver of resentment crept between them. Why do we ever think this was a good idea? If they had just been a little more patient, a little less reckless, maybe the 3 of them could have stayed friends forever. That would have been better than this, where even seeing his face had become an impossible luxury. The helicopter touched down on the roof of the Palisades Point house. The bodyguards unceremoniously dumped them onto the helipad, and, moments later, the aircraft lifted off again. Hearing the roar from the roof, Leo rushed up to investigate. He found them on the ground, their hands and feet still bound. His eyes went wide with alarm. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern as he fumbled to untie the ropes. Ava rubbed her bruised wrists, her expression like ice. She didn't spare him a single glance as she stalked past him and headed downstairs. Chloe was seething, a silent rage building inside her. Leo followed them down, placing 2 glasses of warm water on a coffee table. "You went to New York? Did you find Ethan? How is he?" he asked, nervously picking at the sleeve of his shirt. It can't be, he thought, desperately trying to reassure himself. They came back like this, so things must have gone badly. Ethan has a perfect family, loving friends. He has everything. He doesn't need Ava and Chloe. "I do." He repeated the words silently, a bitter mantra, while keeping a gentle, concerned smile fixed on his face. His question hung in the air. Ava's eyes narrowed, her gaze suddenly sharp and probing. "What did you just say? We never told you we were going to New York." "How did you know?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "What exactly do you know?" Hearing this, Chloe's face hardened. She grabbed Leo's arm, her grip tightening, each word delivered with crushing weight. "What did you do? Talk. Don't make us find out for ourselves." Her voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "Did you say something? Do something to drive him away?" Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He fell back on his old tactic, his face crumpling into a picture of wounded innocence. I didn't. His parents are in New York, he told me that. I just assumed that's where he'd be. Why? Is he not there?" But this time his act didn't work. Ava and Chloe were not fools. They had only been willing to believe him before because they were lying to themselves. They had to believe him in order to make their performance for Ethan convincing. That was over now. Chloe's fingers dug into his arm, leaving deep red marks. "Are you still not going to tell the truth?" she threatened, then glanced at Ava. "Ava, I think he needs a little lesson before he'll be honest." Ava's face was a mask of cold fury Chloe had never seen before. She tapped a finger lightly on the table, and her voice was even colder than her expression. "Do you want to keep your job, Leo? Because if you don't want to end up with nothing, right back in that sad little town you crawled out of, you'll start talking." Now, her words were a death sentence, and he knew it. The tears on Leo's face stopped flowing. His hands dropped limply to his sides as he stared at Ava and Chloe in disbelief. He couldn't understand how their attitude toward him had shifted so completely. Before, his slightest hint of distress had sent them into a panic. Now, there was only cold indifference. He could cry until he was dehydrated, and they wouldn't even blink. He couldn't bring himself to confess to provoking Ethan, to all the little traps he'd laid. He kept his mouth shut, praying desperately to Chloe. "Chloe, I didn't do anything, I swear. Please, you have to believe me. Ethan helped me so much. I'm so grateful to him. How could I ever do anything to hurt him?" He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force more tears. If he's the one you really care about, I can move out." Was he upset that I was living here? He started acting so cold to me all of a sudden. Maybe this is just... He was still trying to plant seeds of doubt. He knew Chloe was the softer of the two. His only hope was that she would give in, just like she always had, and let this whole thing blow over. If they let him stay, he was sure he could win them back. So Ethan had a 20-year head start? So what? If Leo had been born with that kind of privilege, he wouldn't be in this mess. But this time, Chloe's usual indulgence was gone, replaced by a cold, sneering contempt. "You really won't admit it until you've hit rock bottom, will you?" Her smile was pure mockery. "Anyone who knows me knows my temper isn't as good as you seem to think." With a sudden, violent movement, she shoved his head down onto the table, her hands flying to his throat. Ava's voice, like a recurring nightmare, drilled into his ears. "Leo, your job is gone, and I've already contacted your family. They'll be here in a few days to collect you. I suggest you start thinking about how you're going to explain yourself to them." With a few taps on her phone, she had casually destroyed his life. "No, don't let them come here. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything." The terror of facing his family was worse than the feeling of suffocation. Leo was frantic, his mind reeling with panic. At his confession, Chloe slowly released her grip. "Talk. Cough, cough." Leo gasped for air. I can show you my phone." He unlocked it and held it out. "I didn't do anything. You've got it all wrong." He was silently thanking his lucky stars that he'd had the foresight to delete the messages he'd sent to Ethan. Ava didn't even take the phone. One look was enough to tell her he was still lying. Chloe snatched the phone from his hand and immediately made a call. "I'm sending a phone over. I need a full data recovery. Everything." Hearing her words, Leo felt his world collapse. He grabbed her arm, his voice a desperate plea. No, please don't. Don't recover the data. But this time, there were no more chances. They had given him more than enough, and he hadn't taken a single one. While Chloe dealt with the phone, Ava was already on her own, making calls, directing someone to investigate everything Leo had done in the past few months that involved Ethan's song. The next day, the results of the investigation came in. It laid everything out in stark black and white detail. From the moment Leo started at the design firm, he had targeted Ethan. He had seen the quality of Ethan's clothes, the quiet confidence in his speech, and recognized him immediately as a child of wealth and privilege. A few crocodile tears, a made-up story about his tragic background, and a few calls from hired actors pretending to be his parents were all it took for the kind-hearted Ethan to take him under his wing. It wasn't until Leo was in Ethan's orbit and met Ava and Chloe that he understood the true scale of the wealth he'd stumbled upon. People like Ava Lou, he'd only ever seen on the cover of Forbes. And Chloe Chi was a celebrity in her own right, a famous female race car driver whose posters had once been plastered all over Santa Monica. Jealousy, potent and corrosive, had consumed him. He'd clung to Ethan, using him as a bridge to get closer to Ava and Chloe. He couldn't believe his luck when it seemed they had fallen for him so easily, showering him with affection, choosing him over Ethan again and again. To test the limits of their affection, he had orchestrated a series of cruelties, faking an injury to his hand, accidentally smashing one of Ethan's design awards, and even deliberately bringing flowers into the house. After working with Ethan for weeks, he knew perfectly well about his severe asthma and pollen allergies. He had done it on purpose. The malice in him was a bottomless pit. His only regret was that Ethan hadn't died that day. The phone's data had also been fully recovered. The message from the day Ethan left was now glaringly clear on the screen. Sorry, looks like Ava and Chloe ditched you for me again. Guess we'll be seeing a lot of each other now that we're all living together. Get used to it. The words were a physical blow. Chloe was so enraged she slapped the phone across Leo's face. How dare you? She seethed, her teeth clenched. If it weren't for him, do you really think you would have ever been worthy of a second glance from us? Ava leaned back on the sofa, her eyes closed. Get his things out of my house, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. And then bring his family here to find him. Yes, Ms. Lou, Mr. Jean replied, already directing a team of workers to start clearing out Leo's room. Leo collapsed onto the floor, his eyes vacant with despair. No, don't take my things. As the workers marched in and out, carrying his possessions and dumping them unceremoniously on the driveway, Leo scrambled to stop them. He'd only lived in this paradise for a few days. His good life wasn't supposed to be over yet. Why was this happening? He fell to the ground, genuine tears of loss streaming down his face. It's over. It's all over. The future was a black void. He had clawed his way out of his backwater town, fought his way into a prestigious Santa Monica design firm, only to be plunged back into the dirt. The last 2 months had been a beautiful dream. Now he was awake, and in reality, he was still the ugly duckling, with no hope of ever becoming a swan. Even so, Leo decided to make one last, desperate attempt. He raised his phone, dialed Ava's mother, and cried into the receiver. Mrs. Lou, Ava, she's kicking me out. He let his voice trail off, leaving just enough unsaid to invite the worst assumptions. Hearing his choked, pitiful voice, Mrs. Lou's anger flared. Leo, honey, you just wait. I'm on my way over right now. She hung up and rushed over. Ava glared at Leo, her face a thundercloud. Who the hell do you think you are? How dare you slander me? Her composure finally snapped. She grabbed his chin, her fingers digging into his flesh, leaving dark bruises. But Leo clutched his phone like a holy relic, refusing to let go. Chloe put a calming hand on Ava's shoulder. It's okay, she said softly. He's a nobody, just a clown making a scene. Your mom is smart enough to believe her own daughter over him. The words seemed to cool Ava's rage. She slowly released her grip. Mrs. Luke burst through the door, a lecture already on her lips, but Ava simply handed her the printed investigation report. Her mother read it in silence, her expression growing darker with every page. When she finished, her face was grim. She strode over to Leo and, abandoning all pretense of a high society matron, grabbed a fistful of his hair and slapped him hard across the face. A bright red welt immediately rose on his cheek. Mrs. Lou, why? He whimpered. She's just saying that to cover up what she did to me. Enough. Mrs. Lou cut him off. Her laugh was cold, her expression a perfect mirror of her daughter's disdain. Leo, I know my daughter. And besides that, I'm a grown woman. Do you really think I can't tell when something has or hasn't happened between two people? For what you've done, Ethan may have let you off easy, but the Liu family and the Chi family will not. After all, Ethan was the boy all three families, the Songs, the Lius, and the Chis, had doted on his entire life. The day of the Thanksgiving dinner, when Ava and Chloe had shown up with Leo, the Lius and Chis had been deeply embarrassed in front of Ethan's aunt. It wasn't because he was poor. It was because both families had openly spoken for years about wanting Ethan as a son-in-law. They had treated him as such, secretly hoping their own daughters would win his heart. Leo's sudden appearance had blindsided them. Even though the parents had thought he seemed shifty and insincere, they felt they had to respect their daughter's choice. They had treated him well out of a sense of guilt and a need to compensate for their daughter's rejection of Ethan. That was why they had even shown him their family heirlooms, thinking that if he were truly to join the family, they would one day be his. Now that the truth was out, Mrs. Liu felt no need to be polite. She immediately called Chloe's mother. Mrs. She arrived shortly after, and when she heard the full story, she was livid. She had a notoriously fiery temper and was not one to hold back. After hearing what Ava and Chloe had already done, she thought they'd been far too lenient. Mrs. She dragged Leo by his shirt out to the courtyard and shoved his head into the decorative fountain. The flow of water wasn't strong, but it was enough to fill his nose and mouth, making him choke and gag. Every time he coughed, more water rushed into his lungs. After a long moment, she yanked him up by the collar. How does it feel? She snarled, her voice dripping with contempt. Did you get a little taste of the desperation Ethan felt? That feeling of drowning, of knowing you could be saved but being powerless to stop it. She disgustedly threw him onto the stone patio and wiped her hands as if she'd touched something filthy. She turned to her daughter. Chloe, Ava, what kind of person tries to win a man over by being nice to another man, just to make him jealous? That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. No wonder Ethan chose that Lillian girl in New York instead of either of you. For once, Mrs. She had no intention of defending her daughter. Mrs. Liu nodded in grim agreement. You were both completely wrong in how you handled this. What's done is done with Ethan. He's married. You two need to leave him alone. Ava lowered her eyes, a storm of emotions churning within her, but she said nothing. Chloe bit her lip, her chin held high in stubborn defiance. Neither of them was the type to give up easily. If they were, they never would have succeeded in their cutthroat careers, whether in the boardroom or on a racetrack. Their ambition was etched into their bones. Mrs. Liu and Mrs. She exchanged a look and sighed in unison. They knew their daughters' personalities all too well. There was nothing more they could do but let them be. After the mothers left, Ava gave a simple order to have the pile of trash on the patio removed. And so, Leo was unceremoniously dumped on the street, his luggage and belongings thrown in a heap beside him. A sanitation worker, making his rounds, waved a hand at him. Hey, you can't loiter here. Move it along. The word loiter struck Leo like a physical blow. He never thought he would sink this low. His belongings were in such a messy pile, they looked like a heap of garbage. His face flushed red, then went pale. He kicked one of his suitcases in frustration, and the cheap clatter it made only reinforced the image of a junk pile. Just then his phone rang shrilly. For a delusional second, he thought it was Ava or Chloe, calling to say they'd made a mistake. He answered automatically. It was not the call he was hoping for. A rough, gravelly voice with a thick, rural accent crackled over the line. We finally got a hold of you. Who gave you the nerve to take all that money from us? We hear you're making it big now. It's time you paid us back. It was his father. The voice was so full of menace that if he weren't on the other end of a phone, Leo was sure the man would be beating him senseless. Leo frantically hung up, too scared to even make a sound. How did they find me so fast? He scrambled to grab his things, but as his hand closed around his suitcase handle, a horrifying realization dawned on him. He had already given up the lease on his old apartment in Santa Monica. He couldn't go back to the Palisades Point house. He had absolutely nowhere to go. Leo collapsed onto the sidewalk in despair. The city worker returned, his face dark with annoyance. Hey, I told you. You're a public nuisance sitting here like this. You need to leave. Now. The landlord's pitiless voice was a dagger in Leo Xiang's heart. He stomped his foot, his voice choked with fury. Fine. I'm going, all right. Leo made a call, and a moving van arrived to collect his things. He had nowhere to go. The driver, growing impatient, asked him for the third time where he was headed. After a long, humiliating silence, Leo finally mumbled the name of his old apartment complex. The Orchid Apartments, I guess. His only option was to beg his old landlord to let him re-sign the lease. Luckily, it had only been a few days, and the unit hadn't been rented out yet. As the van pulled up to the Orchid Apartments, the first thing Leo saw was his family camped out by the entrance. They looked utterly out of place, their clothes worn and unfashionable, though clean enough. A wave of disgust washed over Leo, and his expression soured. He was about to tell the driver to turn around, but it was too late. The driver had already parked and was starting to unload his luggage. "Leo, give us back our money." Before he could even get out of the car, his parents swarmed the door. His grandparents, along with his younger brother and a couple of cousins, descended on his luggage like vultures, tearing everything open. They tossed his worthless belongings onto the pavement and greedily stuffed his designer bags and clothes into oversized, cheap duffel bags they brought with them. "Let go. That's my stuff. You can't just take it." His protests were useless against their frantic grabbing. His suitcases were ripped open, their contents scattered across the sidewalk. A crowd of onlookers was starting to form, pointing and whispering. His family, completely shameless, only got louder. "Our son stole the family's life savings," his mother shrieked for all to hear. "What's wrong with us taking a few things back?" As if that weren't enough, when Leo tried to persuade them to go up to the apartment, they threw themselves on the ground, creating a scene. They bossed him around, making him do everything. He cooked for the entire family, cleaned the whole apartment, and washed piles of their dirty clothes. If he refused, they threatened to go out into the complex courtyard and broadcast every shameful secret he had. Humiliated, Leo had no choice but to endure it. But that didn't quench their anger. They pushed him to go out and find a job to earn money. Leo spent his days job hunting and his nights doing thankless chores, all while being berated. His condition deteriorated rapidly. In just a few days, he looked as if he'd aged a decade. His face was sallow, and his body swayed unsteadily with every step. He was on the verge of a breakdown. With nowhere else to turn, Leo went to beg Ava Liu and Chloe Chi for forgiveness. He knelt outside the Palisades Point house, all dignity gone, and screamed until his voice was raw. "Ms. Liu, Ms. Chi, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I shouldn't have hurt Ethan's song. I know I was wrong. I really do." He repeated the words over and over, a desperate plea for mercy. But the mansion was dark and empty. Ava and Chloe had already moved back to their old place, leaving the grand house vacant once more. Even though they were gone, the security guard on duty still called to inform them of the situation. "Ignore him." Ava's voice was cool and steady, without a trace of emotion. "Let him kneel. He'll leave eventually." The guard hung up and continued his patrol, keeping a close eye on Leo. Dressed as he was, he looked like he didn't belong anywhere near the property. Leo knelt outside the mansion for a full day and night before his body finally gave out and he collapsed. When he woke up, he was in a hospital and neither Ava nor Chloe was there. He was back in his cramped rental apartment. From the other room, he could hear his parents talking. "We should just go home today," his mother said urgently. "We can't stay here. Leo won't listen to us. He's got legs, he'll just run off again. Let's pack up and go while he's still out of it." His father grunted in agreement. "Fine." The door creaked open. In a surge of adrenaline, Leo scrambled to his feet and bolted. He didn't even stop to put on shoes, snatching his phone as he fled. He didn't know who to turn to. Ava and Chloe were ice cold. In his panic, a name surfaced in his mind. Ethan's song. "That's it. He's so kind, so soft-hearted. He'll definitely forgive me." And so, Leo Seong bought a one-way ticket for the next flight from LAX to New York City, determined to find Ethan. Ava and Chloe got word of his plan immediately. They dispatched their own people in New York to intercept him, ensuring he never got anywhere near Ethan. If we can't even see Ethan, there's no way we're letting that snake get to him first. Their teams in Santa Monica had already identified several groups of people Lillian Gu had sent to watch them. But this was their turf, and they made the rules. In a blatant act of provocation, Chloe had her people track down Lillian's agents, have them beaten badly enough to send a clear message, and then sent them packing right back to the Gu family. Ava, not to be outdone, quietly established her own network of contacts in New York, so they wouldn't be caught off guard again. Today was the 5th time Ava and Chloe had come to Aunt Sarah's house to plead their case. "Aunt Sarah, we truly know we were wrong," Ava said, her words a carefully constructed lie. "We've thought it over. We've let go of our feelings for Ethan. We just want to attend his wedding. As his oldest friends, that's all." Chloe nodded eagerly, her expression a mask of innocence. "Please, Aunt Sarah, just grant us this one small wish. We've known Ethan our whole lives. We can't bear the thought of not even being at his wedding. If we can't be with him, so be it. We were prepared for that. Even if he had chosen between me and Ava, one of us would have been left heartbroken anyway. We just don't want to lose the chance to see him get married. Aunt Sarah, can you please help us? Aunt Sarah looked at them, deeply conflicted. She heard about what they'd done, and she couldn't presume to know what Ethan wanted. But she had watched these two girls grow up. Her heart couldn't help but soften. They had come to her so many times now, and even a heart of stone would eventually crack. She let out a long sigh. Oh, you two. All I can do is ask Ethan for you. I can't promise he'll agree. It was the answer they wanted. Ava and Chloe's faces lit up with gratitude. Thank you, Aunt Sarah. Just hearing you say that is enough. Thank you. After they left, Aunt Sarah agonized for a long time before finally composing a text to Ethan. Ethan, honey, Ava and Chloe said they want to come to your wedding. What do you think? Should you let them? Ethan was in the middle of a tuxedo fitting when his phone chimed. He was busy adjusting the hem of his jacket and couldn't check it. Lillian, can you see who that is? He asked, his head still bowed. Nearby, Lillian Gu stood in a sleek, form-fitting white wedding dress. It was simple and elegant, with no cumbersome train, perfectly accentuating her figure. Of course, she said. She picked up his phone, unlocked it by typing in his initials and birthday, and read the message from Aunt Sarah. Her expression flickered for a fraction of a second before she read it aloud. Ethan, honey, Ava and Chloe said they want to come to your wedding. What do you think? Should you let them? Her eyes darkened slightly, and a hint of jealousy colored her tone. So, Ethan, what do you think? Should we let them come to my wedding? Lillian closed the distance between them, stepping behind him. Waving away the tailor's assistant, she began to personally adjust his cuffs. Her smooth, pale fingers danced over his wrist, a touch that felt impossibly intimate. Lillian, maybe we shouldn't let them come, Ethan stammered, his face flushing as he stared at her serious reflection in the mirror. Lillian let out a soft laugh. She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her front against his back. Ethan, trust me. Her voice was a low murmur against his chest. Trust your wife. I can handle them. Even if they come, they won't be able to cause any trouble. His heart hammered in his chest. He could smell the clean scent of her hair, and a few strands tickled his chin. He stared, mesmerized, at their reflection, not noticing when a deep blush spread across his entire face. He didn't register a single word she said after that, just nodded dumbly. MMM. Okay. He felt like he was turning into a cooked shrimp, his heart pounding out of control. The woman behind him seemed to sense his discomfort, and the smile on her beautiful face grew wider. Look, Ethan, she teased. You look so handsome in the mirror. So charming. He was mortified, completely unaware that this flustered, shy reaction was something he'd never, ever had with Ava or Chloe. His eyes darted everywhere, anywhere, but at the woman behind him. He didn't even notice when his phone was back in his hand, her hand guiding his, her fingers pressing his thumb down to type out two simple words. They can. He felt as though the warmth from her palm had seeped directly into his skin. By the time he finally came back to his senses, he realized with a jolt what had just happened. Lillian had been jealous. An incredible thought surfaced in his mind. Has Lillian fallen for me? Ethan covered his still warm cheeks, unable to believe it. No, he told himself. We've only known each other for a few days. You don't develop feelings that quickly. We're married now. It's normal for her to be a little possessive. To clear his head, once the fitting was done and the alterations noted, Ethan threw himself completely into his work. Lillian watched the serious set of his jaw and said nothing. She simply walked over and adjusted the lamp on his desk, making sure the light was perfect before quietly slipping out of the room. Lillian gave a specific order to her team. Ease up on the surveillance of Ava and Chloe. It wasn't that she was letting her guard down. She was intentionally giving them an opening, an opportunity to make a move so she could be ready for it. Her people received the command and acted immediately. Then, Lillian deliberately leaked the news of Ava and Chloe's impending trip to New York to Ethan's parents. What? Mrs. Song was furious. After how they treated Ethan, they have the audacity to come to his wedding? Not long ago, she couldn't stop singing their praises, practically considering them her daughters-in-law. But they had crossed an unforgivable line. They had gambled with her son's life. When that Leo character had caused Ethan's asthma attack, how much had her son suffered? And at that moment, the childhood friends who had always stood by him had turned their backs on him for a bouquet of flowers from another man. Even if they claimed it was all a ploy to make Ethan realize who he truly loved, Mrs. Song would never permit it. Now, she was only grateful. Grateful that Ethan's grandfather had arranged such a perfect match for him. Compared to Ava and Chloe, Lillian Gu was better by an order of magnitude. At least Lillian's life was uncomplicated, she was devoted to Ethan, and she was a New Yorker. Mrs. Song had known her since she was a girl. She knew her character. Mr. and Mrs. Song immediately let their displeasure with Ava and Chloe be known throughout their social circle. The Song family was one of New York's most prominent, and with their new alliance with the Gu family, their influence was soaring. Eager to stay in their good graces, other powerful families quickly took the hint and aligned themselves. Mr. and Mrs. Song went a step further, explicitly instructing the security at their townhouse not to let the two women anywhere near the property. The moment Ava and Chloe arrived in New York, they were met with the icy indifference of the city's elite. Ethan's number went straight to voicemail. When he tried calling from a different number, he would answer, then immediately block it. Ava managed to get Mr. and Mrs. Song's numbers from Aunt Sarah. She and Chloe divided the task, each calling one of them, hoping to explain what had happened. Mr. Song, this is Ava Liu. I wanted to apologize to you and to Ethan. She never got the rest of the sentence out. The line went dead. Chloe had the same experience. Her call was met with a dial tone. Any subsequent attempts from new numbers were treated the same way. Defeated, Ava and Chloe had no choice but to go directly to the Song family's townhouse, hoping to catch a glimpse of Ethan. They waited outside for nearly a full day, but he never appeared. Finally, as evening fell, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up. Through the tinted side window, Ava saw him. Instantly, Chloe gunned the engine of her sports car, executing a sharp drift to block the Rolls-Royce's path. Ethan, get out, Ava said, stepping out of the car and rapping on the window of the Rolls-Royce. We need to talk. Seeing their faces again, Ethan's brow furrowed instinctively. He glanced at Lillian, a flicker of worry in his eyes that she might get the wrong idea. Reassuringly, he took her hand in his. Lillian's lips curved into a smile. She squeezed his hand back, her voice soft. Shall we get out? Then, right in front of Ava and Chloe, Ethan opened his door, leaned across, and swept Lillian into his arms, carrying her out of the car. His face was still slightly flushed when he set her feet gently on the pavement. It had been her idea, of course. Ethan and Lillian stood with their fingers intertwined, their gazes wary as they faced Ava and Chloe. That look of guardedness was a knife in Chloe's heart. Ethan, we grew up together. How can you look at me like that? Ethan's frown deepened. He had no interest in this pointless drama. Besides, they were the ones who had chosen to throw away their lifelong friendship, weren't they? He looked at them calmly. You don't need to say any of this to me. I have to get home. If you have something to say it quickly. Chloe opened her mouth to argue, but Ava cut her off. She stood before Ethan, her normally cool eyes filled with a desperate intensity. Ethan, we were wrong. We never liked Liu Xiang. We were just using him to make you jealous, to make you realize who you truly loved. We just never imagined. She quickly recounted Leo's fate and tried to explain their reasons for treating Ethan so coldly. When he heard that Leo had fled to New York to seek his help, Ethan felt a sense of revulsion. How could someone who had hurt him so badly still have the nerve to ask him for help? Leo had been sent back to his family by Ava's people. They had given up the place in Santa Monica and dragged him back to their hometown. He was getting what he deserved. Ethan could imagine the miserable life that awaited him. Leo used to cry to him about being poor, and Ethan had helped him however he could. But now, knowing the truth, Ethan felt no pity. But he couldn't accept Ava and Chloe's excuse. He let out a cold, dismissive laugh. Ava, Chloe, stop kidding yourselves. There are a million ways to make me see my own heart. Why did you have to choose the one that would hurt me the most? His eyes bored into them. Can you honestly say that from the moment you met Liu Xiang, you didn't feel a single thing for him? Ava froze, a look of shock and confusion on her face. Chloe looked even more flustered, a flicker of guilt in her eyes. No, of course not, she said, her denial lacking conviction. Lillian stepped in, ruthlessly tearing away their final, flimsy defense. That's enough. Stop deceiving yourselves. If you hadn't neglected Ethan time and time again, Liu Xiang would never have had the chance to hurt him in the first place. I'd wager that by the end, you couldn't even tell if you'd actually developed feelings for him or not. This is nothing but a childish lie. No woman who truly loves a man would use another man to make him jealous. With every word Lillian spoke, the color drained from Ava's and Chloe's faces. Her words struck the very core of their hidden insecurities. They had no rebuttal. Ethan was silent for a long moment before he spoke, his voice heavy with finality. Ava, Chloe, I'm only just realizing it now. I don't think I ever really loved either of you. Maybe there was a spark, an attraction, but it wasn't love. It hadn't reached that point, and you two snuffed it out before it ever had the chance. He said it with a profound sense of release. If you want to come to my wedding, fine. I consent, but I do not want you to ruin it. He looked at them, his expression clear. I'm very happy now. A sharp, Searing pain spread through Ava's chest. She shook her head slightly, staring at him, forcing a brittle smile. Ethan, don't be with someone else. We grew up together. I know everything about you. We're meant for each other, she murmured, refusing to accept reality. Chloe's eyes were bloodshot, her hands clenched into tight fists as she lunged, swinging her hand toward Lillian's face. Why her? I don't accept this. Ethan, if you don't want to marry her, I'll help you run away. We can go abroad or back to Santa Monica, anywhere you want. Lillian could have easily dodged the slap. Instead, she tilted her head just slightly, allowing Chloe's hand to graze her cheek. The contact wasn't severe, but left a faint red mark. Oof! Lillian pressed a hand to her cheek, sucking in a sharp breath as if in pain, her features scrunching up. Even then, her beauty was undiminished. Seeing her hurt, Ethan was overcome with concern. He grabbed her hand, trying to pull it away to see the damage. It's okay, I'm not really hurt. It doesn't hurt, Lillian said, forcing a cheerful smile. Her brave face only made Ethan more frantic. Seeing that she wouldn't let him look, his anger turned on Chloe. Chloe, he demanded, his face cold with fury. Why did you hit her? When did you become so impulsive and violent? The accusation was a crushing weight. It nearly drove Chloe mad. She couldn't believe it. Ethan didn't care about a word she'd said. His entire world was Lillian. She knew exactly how much force she'd used, and that she'd barely made contact. To be framed like this was infuriating. I didn't hit her. She's not hurt. Chloe seethed. Ethan, come with me. She's not who you think she is. She reached for Ethan's arm, but he shook her off without hesitation. This is the Song residence. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere with you. I can't believe you'd hurt someone and then refuse to admit it. His tone was colder than she had ever heard it. Ava, Chloe, we're not friends anymore, and you're not welcome at my wedding. It's clear you have no intention of coming in good faith. With that, Ethan took Lillian's hand and strode past the gate into his family's property. Several of the Song family's security guards and bodyguards moved to block Ava and Chloe, giving them no chance to follow. They stood stubbornly outside the gate until late into the night when Mr. and Mrs. Song finally came out to dismiss them. Ava, Chloe, it's time for you to leave. The Song family does not welcome you, Mrs. Song said, her voice firm but laced with pity. And we have no desire to entrust Ethan to people like you. After all, who's to say there won't be another Liu Xiong? You are both exceptional young women, Mr. Song added, his face a stern, silent wall of support. Don't waste your lives fixated on Ethan. Ava's eyes were webbed with broken capillaries. Her usually cool, composed face was etched with exhaustion. Chloe looked no better, all her former fire and confidence extinguished. Seeing their desperate persistence, Mr. and Mrs. Song just shook their heads and had their security escort the two women away. They wanted to prove they could be devoted, but with the precedent Leo had set, no one could ever fully trust them again. Ava and Chloe looked at each other, and in the other's eyes, they saw only their own humiliating defeat. If they gave up now, what did that make the love they had clung to for so many years? What was the point of more than 2 decades of shared history? Could all those years of devotion truly be worthless compared to someone he had known for less than a month? A stubborn fire ignited in Ava and Chloe's eyes. They spoke at the same time, their voices a single, determined thought. Let's work together. After, it's every woman for herself. Almost without needing to communicate, they laid out their plans. Chloe would get her mother and Mrs. Liu to find every last photo of the 3 of them together, artifacts of their shared past. Unfortunately, there weren't many group photos left. Ethan had burned most of them. What they could find were mostly single shots of them as children. Still, it was better than nothing. Ava, meanwhile, would plant moles inside the Gu family or try to buy off their staff. The wedding was in 3 days. They had a lot to prepare. On the other side of the city, Ethan was also on edge. Even though he was determined to cut ties with Ava and Chloe, their relentless attempts to contact him were getting under his skin. He was unconsciously twisting the cuff of Lillian's sleeve into a wrinkled mess. When he finally noticed what he was doing, he stopped. Lillian, he said quietly, is there any way to end this once and for all? I don't want to be bothered anymore. Having made his decision, he had no interest in being dragged back into their drama. Friendship was out of the question. That ship had sailed long ago. The memories of their childhood were enough. A beautiful memory didn't need to be relived until it shattered. Lillian understood exactly what he was feeling. She patted his shoulder reassuringly. Don't worry, I've already prepared everything. After our wedding, they will never appear in front of us again. Ethan forced himself to relax, to trust her. On the day of the wedding, a magnificent ceremony was held on a sprawling green lawn at a private estate. The entire venue was decorated in romantic shades of pink for Ethan and Lillian. Countless handcrafted, woven flowers were arranged in elaborate sculptures. They had been specially made to accommodate Ethan's asthma and pollen allergies, yet they looked astonishingly real. Not a single guest doubted the authenticity of the wedding. That included Ava and Chloe. But as the guests filled the seats, the bride and groom were nowhere to be seen. Ava and Chloe began to think that maybe, just maybe, Ethan had come to his senses and was running away. What happened next was beyond anything they could have imagined. The Gu family had deployed its latest technology, creating photorealistic holographic projections of Ethan and Lillian to walk down the aisle and go through the entire ceremony. The plan Ava and Chloe had prepared, to publicly object and try to win Ethan back, was now completely useless. They scanned the crowd frantically, searching for any sign of the real Ethan. But their eyes ached from the effort, and he was nowhere to be found. He wasn't even there. They had been tricked. The couple may now exchange rings, and the groom may kiss the bride. The two holograms complied. Just then, the provocative video Ava and Chloe had prepared to hijack the event was replaced. Instead, the large screens lit up with a montage of friends and family from all over the world offering their heartfelt blessings to Ethan and Lillian. The video of blessings ended, and the screen transitioned to a live feed of Ethan and Lillian's real wedding. At that very moment, they were at the Astor Hall, a historic landmark in the heart of New York, holding a private, traditional ceremony. The gilded, ornate halls were draped in crimson silk. The triumphant sound of a brass fanfare echoed through the space, filling every guest's heart with joy. Under the watchful eyes of their closest family and friends, Ethan, dressed in a timeless, classic tuxedo, arrived in a horse-drawn carriage. Behind him, a procession of attendants tossed handfuls of custom-minted miniature gold bars and celebratory sweets to an appreciative crowd of onlookers gathered outside the private venue. Simultaneously, back at the estate, the guests at the public ceremony each received their own commemorative gold bars and boxes of confections. The sheer extravagance of the wedding was staggering. Ava and Chloe watched, horrified, as the live feed showed the carriage stopping at the grand entrance of the Astor Hall. Ethan dismounted gracefully, lifted Lillian from the carriage, and carried her, his steps firm and unwavering, into the hall. Ava bit her lip so hard it bled, her eyes burning with rage. Thump! Chloe slammed her fist on the table. She grabbed her jacket and stormed out, not even glancing back at Ava. She sprinted to her sports car and sped off, tires screeching, racing toward the historic venue. She didn't care about anything else anymore. The plan, the sabotage, none of it mattered. All she wanted was to see Ethan. If she couldn't stop him from getting a marriage license, she could still stop the wedding itself. Driving with reckless abandon, Chloe didn't see the truck barreling through the intersection, its driver having lost control. A deafening crash of metal on metal. The side of Chloe's car crumpled like paper, her leg pinned and crushed. In that instant, she felt a terrifying numbness spread through her limb. She couldn't feel her leg at all. Warm blood trickled from her forehead down her cheek. For a terrifying moment, Chloe thought she was going to die. Her first instinct was to call Ethan, but she'd forgotten he had deleted and blocked every one of her numbers. As expected, the call didn't go through. Ava had run out after her, but had been too late to stop Chloe's frantic departure. Even though she herself was nearly consumed by jealousy, Ava fought to keep a grip on her composure. It's just a wedding, she told herself. People get divorced. There are a million ways to get Ethan away from Lillian Gu. Our years of history can't be erased. That alone will be enough to plant seeds of doubt and suspicion in Lillian's mind. She repeated the mantra over and over, but it was useless. On her way to the Astor Hall, she saw the wreckage of Chloe's car. Faced with a choice, Ava finally gave up on crashing the wedding. Chloe's life was more important. They were friends. She couldn't just leave her to die. Ava rushed Chloe to the hospital. By the time Mrs. Chi arrived, Ethan's wedding was over. In the space of a single day, Ava had become a hollowed-out version of herself. Chloe's life was saved, but her leg was still in surgery. Whether they could save it was uncertain. The casual promise she had once made to Leo, that she would stop racing, had been fulfilled in the cruelest way possible. Whether her leg healed or not, her racing career was over. Ava saw the news reports everywhere, splashed with photos of Ethan's lavish wedding. She stared at a picture of Lillian on her phone, a fire of pure rage building inside her. Lillian did this. It had to be her. The thought consumed her. ignoring the protests of her mother and Mrs. Chi. Ava stormed out of the hospital and went straight to the Gu family's residence. It was the first day of their new married life. Lillian and Ethan were enjoying a rare, quiet morning in bed. The soft sunlight and fresh air outside held no appeal. Suddenly, a frantic, insistent ringing of the doorbell shattered the peace. Lillian frowned, annoyed at the interruption. She threw on a silk robe and went to the door. The moment she opened it, Ava's fist flew at her face. Lillian sidestepped the blow with fluid grace, catching Ava's wrist in an iron grip. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Ava's eyes were shadowed with dark circles, her hair a tangled mess. It was the most disheveled she had ever looked. Her voice was cold enough to freeze water. "You stole Ethan, but that wasn't enough for you, was it? Why did you have someone run Chloe off the road? She's lying in a hospital bed, and we don't even know if she'll keep her leg. You're going to pay for this." Ava lunged again, and the two of them began to fight. Lillian parried Ava's attacks with ease, her movements economical and precise. "Ava, I wouldn't stoop to something so crude," she said calmly. "I simply arranged for people to escort you both back to Santa Monica and to apply some business pressure to your families. Just enough to keep you busy and away from me and Ethan. That's all." The commotion drew Ethan out. "Stop it, both of you," he yelled, stepping between them. "I believe Lillian. We'll use evidence to sort this out." Hearing his voice, Ava finally calmed down. Not long after, the Gu family's investigators presented their findings. The driver who hit Chloe had experienced catastrophic brake failure. It was a tragic accident, completely unrelated to Lillian. And, just as Lillian had said, her people were meant to intercept them during their attempted wedding crash, sedate them, and fly them back to California. The economic assault on the Liu and Chi family businesses in Santa Monica had already begun. Mrs. Liu was calling Ava nonstop, urging her to come home. Chloe, too, had been transferred to a Santa Monica hospital for her recovery. From the moment she decided to marry Ethan, Lillian had been setting up a new corporation in California specifically to compete with Liu Enterprises. With the Song family's existing influence there, the combined power of the two families began to systematically squeeze the Liu and Chi empires. When Chloe woke up and saw her leg trapped in a complex web of casts and braces, she nearly lost her mind. Ava sat by her bed, her voice flat and cold. "Your leg is fine. You'll keep it, but you'll need months of physical therapy and rest. You can forget about ever racing again." Hearing she could never race again was the one thing Chloe couldn't accept. She could have given it up on her own terms, but to have it taken from her like this was unbearable. Months later, after a grueling recovery, Chloe could finally walk normally again. Full of hope, she got into her car. But before she could even turn the key, a cold sweat broke out across her body. The feeling of impending death, the shadow of the crash, washed over her, and she couldn't shake it. She couldn't even drive a normal car, let alone a race car. Heart shattered, Chloe stumbled out of the car, drenched in sweat as if she'd been pulled from a lake, her face pale as a ghost. Ava helped steady her, but said nothing. "Why are you still here with me? What? Have you given up on Ethan?" Ava stared blankly into the distance and let out a long sigh. What else is there to do? During Chloe's recovery, she hadn't stopped trying. She sent letters to Ethan, filled with memories of their shared past, hoping to rekindle something. She never received a single reply. Ethan had been completely open with Lillian about his history with them. There was no room for jealousy or suspicion to take root in a relationship built on such honesty. And besides, Ava had seen it with her own eyes, the way Ethan looked at Lillian. It was a kind of love he had never, ever shown them. Ava had no choice but to give up. What was the point of fighting when she was so clearly defeated? Hearing Ava's words, Chloe felt the last of her own hope drain away. She was a cripple now. If even Ava couldn't win, what chance did she have against Lillian Gu? The two of them silently went their separate ways. Ava threw all her energy into her work, keeping herself too busy to think. Chloe tried again and again to overcome her psychological trauma, but the fear remained. Imperceptibly, they saw each other less and less, until they had nothing left to say. The three of them, once so inseparable, had quietly, irrevocably drifted apart.